Hi everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to our vegetable garden in Spokane, Washington, where the hardiness zone ranges from 5B to 6A. Today's topic is soil, and while that might sound rather dull, did you know that soil is the very foundation of your vegetable garden? It is. So let me start out this video with an amazing fact. This is 1 teaspoon of soil. Did you know that this contains more beneficial microorganisms than there are humans on this planet? I think that is amazing. And one thing I want to mention is that they become active after the soil temperature has reached about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The soil microorganisms make nutrients available to our plants, so you can see what an important role they play. Every year we grow a massive vegetable garden with wonderful harvests. This would not be possible if we didn't promote healthy soil. So let's look at what we do, and I'm hopeful you'll adopt these methods as well in your own garden. Now I know we're all itching to start gardening, and maybe you have gotten to because you live in a warmer area than we do. But it's so important to not start working with the soil when it's still wet. So the easy test is to take a scoopful of soil with a trowel and then squeeze the soil together in your hand. And if you just created a mud pie, that means it's still wet and way too wet to work with. But if you poke it apart and it's just all nice and crumbly like this, that means it's safe to start working with it. So this is a very easy way to test the soil to see if it's okay to start working with it and planting in it. Now I have a true confession to share with you. Many years ago, I was so anxious to start gardening and I jumped the gun. I just started working with the soil, turning it over and making furrows and so on, thinking everything was great, and boy was I getting a jump start on the garden. What ended up happening is the soil in our beds all turned to dirt clods. They were just hard and clumpy. They didn't take water very well, and they stayed that way for the entire growing season. So I learned my lesson that year, and I have kept that in mind all this time, and I'm always very careful to test the soil before I begin working with it. Now within our soil, there are all sorts of microorganisms, as I mentioned earlier, and also creatures like earthworms and springtails, and they reside at different levels within the soil. So there is a structure here, even though you can't see it, where different types of things are in the soil doing great things for our gardens. In the old days, way before we had raised beds, we used to use a rototiller every spring. We would turn over the soil with it and, unbeknownst to us, wreak havoc with the soil. And you know, that just isn't done anymore in home gardens. It's much better to work gently with the soil, do minimal amounts of disturbance to protect those microorganisms and different kinds of soil critters. This is my favorite tool for preparing a raised bed. It's basically called a spading fork. And what I like to do is just put it a couple of inches into the soil and then just move it a little bit to loosen up the soil, because it does compact a bit over the course of the winter. And this type of preparation, which looks pretty simple, right, works great when you're going to be broadcast planting a lot of seeds, or maybe planting a few rows within a bed. And so you're just trying to make it so you can easily make a furrow, for example, to put seeds into, and so on. A trowel works great for this too. And if I'm going to add some type of nutrient to the surface of the soil, I can just use this spading fork to gently work it in. And generally speaking, the nutrients will work their way down through the layers of soil for you. Do you have sandy soil or clay soil in your garden? That can be problematic no matter what you're growing, not just vegetables. With sandy soil, the water just runs right through it, so it's hard to deliver consistent moisture to your vegetable plants. With clay soil, it basically stays waterlogged. It's just very dense. Fortunately, I have a solution for you: compost. If you add compost to sandy soil, it bulks it up and helps it retain moisture longer, and it adds nutrients. With clay soil, it sort of thins it out more so that it doesn't become so waterlogged and it isn't so hard to work with. So compost is the answer. So what kinds of nutrients do we add to our garden beds? Well, first of all, we use our own compost that we've made from kitchen scraps and plant material from our whole landscape, and it is packed with all sorts of great nutrients. So this is finished compost, and it is going to be a great amendment for the soil. We also use organic composted chicken manure that we have bought from our local garden center. We also might use some bone meal or fish bone meal, which is high in phosphorus. That's the middle number on fertilizer packages. And phosphorus helps with root growth, especially for things like carrots and parsnips. And it also helps plants that need to bloom and set fruits. We also might use this all-purpose organic fertilizer. And you'll notice this one also has some phosphorus in it, more so than nitrogen. So both of these are great amendments, and as always, you want to follow the directions on the package. Now, if you watched last week's video about the layout of our vegetable garden, you saw how I create a paper layout of the garden beds and where each crop will be going. So let's take a quick look as it relates to soil prep. So for example, carrots and parsnips are root crops, and they will benefit from the addition of bone meal. So that's definitely getting some. And then in this bed, half the bed is beets, the other half is chard. So the beet side of the bed is going to get bone meal because beets are a root crop. Now broccoli definitely benefits from nitrogen, so it's going to get some chicken manure in the bed. Also, the kale bed will get nitrogen, and so will the lettuce and pak choi bed. All of those will appreciate that extra boost for developing their leaves and plants as a whole. For crops like peppers, tomatoes, summer squash, pumpkins, winter squash, and cucumbers, those will all get compost from our compost pile and some of that vegetable fertilizer that I showed you earlier. Now, we grow corn every single year, and it is a very heavy feeder. So you can bet that the beds they grew in last year are going to get plenty of nutrients added back in, and the beds that will be growing corn in this year will also get either chicken manure or compost. We start a lot of plants indoors from seed, and while they're indoors developing, we are giving them a diluted Alaska fish fertilizer, which is high in nitrogen, and that's to give them a good start. Now, when it's time to move them out to the garden and transplant them into the soil, we will typically give them another feeding of fish fertilizer and maybe another one about 2 weeks later. But if the seedling happens to be something that blooms and sets fruit, so things like tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, winter squash, cucumbers, those types of things, we do one extra step when we're planting them, and that is we make the hole a little bit deeper than the root system. We'll add in a little bit of that organic vegetable fertilizer that I showed you. We'll put a little soil on top of that so the roots don't immediately come into direct contact with the fertilizer. And then we'll plant the seedling as normal. But I just wanted to let you know kind of what the game plan is. And certainly I will do a video when I'm transplanting things into the garden, which I can hardly wait for, frankly. Knowing which fertilizer to use for different vegetable crops can be very confusing, and I realize that I'm just giving you the basics here. But a very nice follower named Cecilia sent me a note and asked if I would be willing to make a chart that shows the different types of vegetable crops you could grow and then which types of fertilizers they would benefit from. And I'm very happy to do that. Might take me a few days, but I'll definitely put it on my website, susansinthegarden.com, and it will be under the guides menu. Just go down to where F would be in the list, and it should be there in a few days. Thank you, Cecilia, for suggesting that. Okay, that's everything for today. I hope this video was helpful. Are you going to take good care of your soil? Please say yes. Thanks so much for watching today, everybody. I'll see you next week. Happy gardening.